Hey guys, welcome back to Not Your College Life with Lisa Beals. I am your host, Lisa Beals. I am the Midwestern mom slash college administrator who's done the college thing myself and sent a few kids through school and realized that universities, we don't make it easy on parents or students. And I believe that classes in college should be hard, but the process of getting through the university should not be hard. So I'm here to bridge that gap for parents and students with the university so that you, mom, can simply focus on coaching your student into a self-sufficient, highly productive adult and escort you into your phase of empty nester syndrome to deal with next. So this week's episode, I'm bringing to you a joint venture with an amazing young woman that I met through some social media. Her name is Alicia, and Alicia has a phenomenal podcast geared towards students. She herself is a first gen, just finished her PhD. I'm so proud of her. And we had an amazing conversation, and we wanted to share with you guys this is going to end up in 2 episodes because we had such great conversation. I couldn't cut it off. So it's a little longer than normal, so I want to break it into 2. But we decided we were going to cover 3 things every student wishes their parent knew, and 3 things every parent wishes their student knew. So no further ado, let's jump into this week's episode with Alicia. She is the College Life Coach. On Instagram is where you'll mostly see her, and she is the host of the College Life podcast for students on how to make the most of your college life for students. It's great. Give it a listen. This is a joint podcast with Not Your College Life with Lisa Beals and my new friend. I'll let her introduce herself.
Yeah, so great. I'm so excited to be here and to have this collaboration. I think it's so fun and really cool how it even just came about. But yeah, my name's Alicia Sepulveda. I consider myself as the College Life Coach. I've been coaching college students, so kind of like a life coach for students over the past 10 years now. I've worked one-on-one with over 1,000 students. And it's just been such a fun ride. And about 3 years ago, I started the podcast, the College Life Podcast, which is a podcast just for college students and those who work with them. So it's really geared towards college students mostly, but I have some friends who listen to it who have just heard about the podcast, but they're sharing it with their students, which is great. And I think this really came about because I actually follow Lisa on Instagram, and I think it's been really hard to just meet people randomly during COVID. And I think that is why I finally was like, I need to reach out to you because I really wanted to talk to you about what you do because it really resonated with me. When you think about the parent perspective of the college process and the college student, I think it's so critical. And there's also a lot of room for improvement in all areas, I think, on the college higher ed side, on the student side, on the parent side, and everything in between. So I'm so excited to have this conversation today.
Super, super. And for those of you that follow Alicia and are new to me, I am a college administrator slash mom of college students. My kids are through school. I did the college thing myself, and my journey is as a college admin, I realize that we make it more challenging than it should be for both students and parents to navigate what is higher ed. And I always say college should be hard. Navigating college should not be. It should be hard in the classroom. That's it. And so my podcast, actually, this is funny. I was thinking about this the last time Alicia and I talked. Really, the impetus that pushed me over the edge to actually do something, put something out there in the atmosphere was my son-in-law was working on his, he was going to get a second degree because his first degree did not lead to gainful employment. He got a 4-year degree, and he was trying to get into a really competitive program. And so he was taking some prereqs and then transferring them in. And I was coaching him on all of the steps that are part of the transfer process and application process. And he would just come back to me and he'd say, well, they told me they told me, the air quotes, they told me that it would be about 3 to 4 weeks before they could get my credit loaded. And the application deadline is in 2 weeks. So while you think you're doing a good job, and I would say, well, call them back and let them know that it's blah, blah, blah. And so we did this back and forth. And I could feel my blood pressure rising and saying, you guys, I'm telling you how to do it. And they're like, but it's not, they're not responding like that. Mm-hmm. And so I had to pick up the phone and call colleague to colleague to say, and it shouldn't be like that. And so I don't feel that I have the power and influence to change how post-secondary institutions choose to engage with students. So I thought, I'm going to do what I can, and I'm going to put information out there. I'm going to teach parents how to use the jargon and what I think they need to do to help their student get through the system with as little frustration as humanly possible. So that's where this podcast was born. And I sat on the title for probably 6 months trying to figure out. I wanted something that was a little bit of a play on words, but also had a little tongue in cheek to it. So that's why it's Not Your College Life.
Very
much so. Very much so.
And that really resonated with me. I was like, what does this mean? Uh-huh. And I was intrigued. And then that's kind of how we started connecting.
Super, super. So Alicia and I thought that it would be interesting, since we are sharing this on both our platforms and we have very different audiences. It would be really insightful, entertaining, choose your adjective, if she could share some things that every student wishes their parent knew. And I would share some things that every parent wished their student knew and or believed.
Ooh, yeah, so good.
Okay, so I'll let you go first. Give me one, and then we'll just do some back and forth.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Yeah. So my first one is super basic, but I feel like sometimes we forget the basics of things. Mm-hmm. So I will just start here. And the first one is that every student really wishes, every child, I guess, wishes that they could just be heard and that you would listen a little bit more. And I say that because a lot of times the students that I work with don't feel heard very often. I mean, not in their peer group, sometimes not in the classroom. They don't feel like they could even share their voice because there's so many insecurities or self-doubts. And so I think a lot of times in the parents, like child interaction, especially at that age, there's a lot there because you've been with them for so long, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. You've raised them. They're older now. They can start making kind of their own decisions, but I think that a lot of times like the parent has like an agenda that they're wanting their student to do. Mm-hmm. And it's usually out of like a really, really good place, right? They want their child to be successful, to be happy, to be a great citizen, to be financially secure, to have all those amazing things and be healthy. But it comes from this is probably the best way for you to do it. And the student really doesn't have a voice in that mm-hmm. as much as I think that they want. However, I think that also like the student has a really hard time also sharing their voice. And so you have to really create that space because it doesn't just happen. I think having those really strong connections between a child and a parent mm-hmm. is so challenging already because mm-hmm. again, there's so much there. Yeah. But I think that like, it's so hard for students in our one-on-one time to share their own story and to share their vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. Like you give them a couple hours, like 2 meetings, they're sharing some of really intense struggles that they're going through mm-hmm. and they haven't shared it with anybody. And it is so wild that if you just spend some really intentional time with another person, right? Like, and you're just trying to focus on hearing them, what comes out of those types of conversations.
So I think that's really insightful because what I hear as a parent is not necessarily student wanting to be heard, but more I need to shut up and listen mm-hmm. as a parent. Mm-hmm. And I think that is so insightful. And I think as a parent, we spend so much time directing and telling you, student, what to do, that we are not intentional, and no one shows us how to be intentional, to start to shift that dynamic to be less of a tell you what to do so you're safe and you're, doing all the things you need to do. It's really difficult to shift that dynamic to be more of a listener and a coach and less of a directive and tell you what you need to do. And I find that really, really interesting, because I have heard from several of my other mom friends that have just said, I just need to ask a question with the intent to listen to the answer, not for me to give them what I think the answer should be, but to actually ask a question and then listen.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good one.
Yeah. And I think, I want to share a caveat that I'm not a parent. So I know that I'm kind of simplifying this too. Like, oh, just listen, it's going to be fine. And that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, I mean, I have a parent and two parents, and, I have my own kind of relationship, right? I think we all kind of have messed up relationships, but they're still really positive. Like my relationship with my parents are awesome. And there are things that I wish would have been different. And that's hindsight, right? And also being a first generation student and not really knowing what questions to even ask. But but I think this space of having real conversations is really challenging for a lot of us. And it's partially because of social media too. Depending on how like your child grew up, or when they had a cell phone, or when they were able to start engaging on social media, whether you knew it or not, right? And it just impacts them in such a different way. And I find they have they have such a hard time making friends, like students do. Just in general, this is outside of COVID times, and having really meaningful relationships. And when they can have a meaningful relationship with a parent, like it just elevates that conversation and the impact that you can have on your child too, in their life, just so much more. But it's just hard to do.
I think that as a parent, I would say that burden lies with the parent to start that process. And if you're a student and you can't share this episode with your parent, or you're a student and you don't know how to get your parent to understand that, then I would say reach out to someone, a trusted friend, another adult, a mentor, a coach, and say, how can I start having this conversation with my parent? Because, it starts somewhere, and, you could be the next generation to bridge that gap between parent and child a little bit better than the last generation. And I think when you become a parent, that's what you want. That's your goal, right? Is to give your kids a better, quote, better life than what you thought you had. So.
Yeah. And like the flip side of this too is correct as well. Like I think as a parent, you kind of have to start it and like lead that effort, but the student also has to, or your child has to also show up, right? And be willing to be vulnerable. And it might not happen at first, or for a while, but just being there and consistently saying, hey, I'm here if you want to talk, or because it might not happen the 7th time, it might not happen the 10th time that you do it, but that 11th time, it can be so powerful.
Yes. And it'll completely change your relationship. Yes. Yeah. So, I'm going to put mine a little bit in a different order based on how you started, because I think this one will go a little bit better later. But to that end, one of the things that I feel like as a parent and I say this over and over when I have interacted with students who have come to me at work and have had a really awful semester. And we have this conversation. Well, why didn't you reach out for help? Why didn't you let your parents know you're struggling? And they're like, well, I didn't want to disappoint them. I didn't want to, they have this whole story playing in their head about how they're going to disappoint their parents and how they just are not living up to expectations. And I look at them, and I've had these conversations with parents in the room, and I've looked at the student and I've said, I promise you, your mom, your dad, the primary thing they want for you is your happiness. And the parents are just over there just, yes, that's right. I just want you to be happy. And I don't know, until you're a parent, I don't know that as a child or student, I don't know that you truly comprehend that that doesn't necessarily come with all the strings that you as the child think it comes with. Now, that was, I know there's always exclusions to that, right? There are some people that don't have the same genuine care and concern for their child. There's always the outliers, but I would say a great portion of children out there, their parents' number one wish for them is their own child's happiness by that child's definition, not the parent's definition.
Yeah. And where do you think that gets lost? Because I see that all the time where students have so much pressure on them. And I think it doesn't just come from parents. This is a larger issue for sure. But I think it's kind of reinforced in some ways. They're getting some kind of message specifically from their parents about what they are supposed to do or what is going to be what they think their parents think is going to be best for them.
Right, right.
And they embody that so much. But then if they have a conversation about it, a real conversation, not this like quick conversation, I think it does change. The conversation shifts.
Yes.
So how do we make that happen?
Yeah.
Is it just conversation?
Right. I don't think we're having enough intentional conversation, parent to child. I think because you have to be intentional, right? And you've got to build in time for that. And we are all living such very busy lives. The moms that I would have loved to have emulated when my kids were younger were very intentional about sitting down and, okay, this is family meeting time, or we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this. And I want you to share your thoughts. And she was very intentional in having those, we're going to look each other in the eye and we're going to have some real conversations. And I'm going to be honest with you. And you're not going to always like everything I have to say. And I'm going to expect the same from you. And you just know that I'm not always going to like or agree with everything that you're going to tell me. But that's part of having a relationship. So, I think it's being very intentional in scheduling those. And it seems, you watch the Hallmark movie and that's not life, right? Life is messy. Life is ugly. And not every conversation is going to end with a hug. Some of those honest conversations may be, okay, I can't bend to where you want to go. You're not going to bend to where I want to go. So we're going to have to put a pin in this for now and maybe come back to this. And know that doesn't detract from how much we love each other. That's a hard piece too.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Awesome. Well, I think you probably have some, I would say, ideas around this for the kind of next one that I have, but really being okay with mental health. I'm curious from a parent's perspective what you think, but a lot of the students that I work with, I guess it's on a spectrum. You have the parents who have had their child in therapy for years and they've also, gotten medication, just had a lot of support around mental health. And so students are able to talk about it and that kind of thing. And then the other piece here is where students have a really crappy semester or two, and their mental health is impacting their academics. Their mental health is impacting their daily functioning, getting out of bed, their anxiety, their interactions with their friends, everything. And they're constantly having to battle staying in school with this mental health thing that's happening and having to grapple with, well, I have to stay in school because of my parents, or I have to stay in school because of what there are other
fill in the blank, right?
Too. Yes.
Yeah.
But there's, again, and it kind of goes along with this disappointing of parents too. They don't want to, like, students don't want to disappoint you. And I think parents are always want happiness for their child. And it's like this weird thing that it's like this dichotomy that it's like not connecting for some reason, even though it's really the same thing. So anyway, I think around mental health and having more conversations around mental health, if you haven't had those yet, and I don't think that this is the case for most parents or all parents, but I think there are still some parents out there who are really having a hard time with, wait, you have ADHD? We would have found that a long time ago. That's actually not the case always. No. So being open to what might happen as a result of your child leaving and going to college and making this transition.
That is so, you would think, you guys, we did not plan these ahead of time, but that ties really well into my number 2 as well, which was a parent never wants to see their child suffer. And I think whether it's financially, academically, with their friends, with their roommate, with mental health, and that is a big one. That is a huge one, especially in today's world. You hear that the anxiety and depression has gone up, especially with the isolation. Now, that's not to say that some kids haven't figured it out. I've seen even extreme introverts figure out how to find some meaningful connections, but it takes them being vulnerable and putting themselves out there and being creative. But from a parent perspective, I think part of the issue with talking about mental health is there's a stigma. It's getting better. I know that our international friends probably struggle with this more because there are some cultures where they do not believe that that is a true chemical imbalance in your brain that needs treated. They think it's a sign of weakness or whatever. And so those kids, my heart really goes out for those kids that are from those cultures that don't recognize it, because those are the ones that I end up seeing the notice that they've taken their own lives because they just have nowhere else to turn. And my heart grieves for those mothers, because in many cases I've witnessed moms realize there's really something real going on and want to get help, but they don't have the power or the autonomy to be able to do that on behalf of their student. I think the other piece is not lack of awareness, but understanding. And so if I don't know how to fix it, if I just pretend it's not there, maybe it'll just go away. So because I don't have the power to control or fix it for my kid, because that's the one thing I want to do, right? As soon as I hear that you're suffering, that's the first thing I'm going to do is, okay, how do I fix it? What's going on? Okay, let me tell you that you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and that's not necessarily how it works. And so for a parent, there's a lot of their own mind work that they've got to do before even having that conversation with their student about their mental health. And I think, I don't care how well adjusted you think your child is today. I think, to your point, I think every parent needs to take some time, parent to child, one-on-one, whether it's driving in the car, going to the grocery, or, while you're binge watching your next series during the commercials or whatever. So, I've heard a lot of kids are really struggling with depression and anxiety. How do you think you're doing? How are you handling it? And then shut up. Mm-hmm. And like you said, they may not open up right away, but ask them again, not relentless, but just on occasion, come back to it and let them know that it's okay for them to share with you that you're struggling, and that you don't have to be the one to fix it. You just need to hear and validate. That has to be hard. I can't imagine how tough it is. What do you want to do about it? Is there anything I can do to help? Yes. So I think that was a great one. Yeah.
Yeah. And just, I think it kind of goes back to this open-minded. I think we send our kids to college because we want them to learn and we want them to, be successful and all those things. And really it's like learning. And I think both parties need to be open-minded and learning, right? Yeah. In these conversations and being open to trying new things. And again, I think that there's so many caveats here because we know that there are like parents who are there's trauma and there's like a lot of things happening. A lot
of baggage. Yes.
That we have to be really mindful of in these conversations. And sometimes it's not worth it to have these conversations. I don't think these are the parents that we're talking about.
No.
But like the parents who are listening here, but who knows, maybe, but yeah, it's like, how can we both look, or all of us, myself included, look inward to say, why am I having such a strong reaction to this, negative or positive, you know, and what's happening with my own mental health? What's happening? Like, why am I feeling so strongly about this one way or another? Or I don't know, just to examine it and reflect on that. Because again, especially even how I grew up, mental health was not talked about until post-college for me personally.
Really?
I didn't. Yeah. And I mean, I talked to a friend with anxiety, and she was sharing some of her experiences, and she shared that, like, she just shared something that I was like, oh my gosh, you too? Like, I experience that all the time, you know? And I never really made the connection that I might have anxiety. And then once I was able to see that and even just like name it for myself, that, and exploring that a little bit more, I reflected and I was like, oh my gosh. And even looking at my mom and how she's experiencing the world and how she is very anxious. And I never really like noticed it.
You didn't recognize that's what it was. Yeah.
But like, and we've had some conversations, but they haven't been like really impactful or like really deep, I think. Anyway, but yeah, I just think with mental health, it's so hard because we all have mental health in a good, and like, it's like, it fluctuates, and sometimes we're doing really well and sometimes we're struggling, and we just don't really talk about it as much as we should, whether it's a diagnosis or it's just taking care of ourselves. And what does that mean? What does that look like? And I think too, a lot of kids grow up around parents who like maybe don't do self-care, right? Or
didn't set a good example. Yes.
Whatever that means, right? And whether that was ever talked about, but it's the observation of it. Right.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah. If I grow up seeing my mom stressed out all the time and going from one thing to another and like not really like taking a second to breathe and that kind of thing, and going, it can be easy for me to just say that that's how the world is and that's how the world should be. That's how I should be. And so again, there's a lot there, but mental health isn't just, I feel like it's kind of like, oh my gosh, you're way over here and you have this diagnosis and you need medication, all the way to like, it doesn't exist. And there's so much more of us that are in, that are like in this huge chunk. There's like probably 80-90% of us, right, who are in this space, who are sometimes struggling and sometimes doing really well. And
life is 50-50. And so you can't recognize the good unless you get to experience the bad. And it's what you choose to, the story you choose to tell yourself about what those bad experiences, bad feelings are. And I would challenge any student that if you need mental health assistance, whether it's you feel like you need therapy, medication, whatever, you don't need your parents' permission to get that. If nothing else, that would be a great lesson for you to realize that self-advocacy is a great thing to have.
Ooh, which I think we should get into for sure.
Okay, what did you guys think? That was some great stuff, right? So this is not it. This is not the end. There's more to come next week. So pay attention. Look for the last of this 2-part episode in next week's podcast. Thanks, Alicia. I look forward to doing another episode with you again soon.